Hey guys, this is our last English Bootcamp video. You are almost done. And if you haven't watched the reading strategies video, video 4A, go back and do that now. And this is 4B, so interacting with a text. We're going to talk about how to read and respond to a text this week. We're going to cover the topics of plagiarism, summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. So I'll go ahead and get the screen share going. Okay, here we go. And so again, we're going to talk about summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting, but the caveat is watch out for plagiarism. So we'll talk about what that means first of all. So plagiarism is an act of presenting another person's work or idea as your own. Sometimes people do this on purpose. They don't want to put the work in, and so they steal someone else's idea or buy an essay and hand it in. But sometimes people do it by accident and they don't actually realize that they're doing it. So that's why we're going to kind of cover this topic. So here are some examples of plagiarism. Turning in a paper downloaded from an online source. Most people know that that's wrong. Or buying or hiring someone else to write a paper for you. That's pretty clear that that's not okay. Here's where some people make mistakes though. So you cannot copy directly from a book or someone else's work and not tell where you got that information from or use quotation marks. So whenever you copy the exact words down from a book, you need to put it in quotation marks and say where you got that information. Even if you don't copy down an entire paragraph, say you mix up the order of the sentences and change a few words here or there, that's still plagiarism. It needs to be entirely in your own words. And here is where things get really tricky. Even if you put the whole thing in your own words, you still have to say where you got that idea, because you could be taking credit for someone else's idea. And so that's where people make mistakes sometimes. So here's an example of a terrible website where you can steal essays and hand them in. Don't do it. And now let's talk about what plagiarism might look like. So say you have to write about Canada. So you look up an article in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Here's the article. Canada, second largest country in the world in area after Russia, occupying roughly the northern 2/5 of the continent of North America. Despite Canada's great size, it is one of the world's most sparsely populated countries. This fact, coupled with the grandeur of the landscape, has been central to the sense of Canadian national identity. Although Canadians are comparatively few in number, they have crafted what many observers consider to be a model multicultural society, welcoming immigrant populations from every other continent. In addition, Canada harbors and exports a wealth of natural resources and intellectual capital equaled by few other countries. So then, let's say you're a student and you write this based on that paragraph. You write, Canada is second largest country in the world in area after Russia. It occupies roughly the northern 2/5 of the continent of North America. Even though Canada is so big, it is one of the world's most sparsely populated countries. This fact is central to the sense of Canadian national identity, and to mine too as a fellow Canadian. So let's think, is this plagiarized? Did the student steal the ideas from the Encyclopedia Britannica? Well, yes, he did. If we look in purple, you can see the first sentence is pretty much identical. Here we can see the second sentence. He slightly changed it, but all those red words are the same, the exact same words. Here, again, he changed the beginning of the sentence from despite Canada's great size to even though Canada is so big. The rest of the words of the sentence are identical. They're the exact words. And here, again in green, this fact, central to the sense of Canadian national identity, we've used the exact same words. And now he did add on his own idea at the end. It's part of my identity too as a fellow Canadian, which is a good ending, but he has plagiarized, he has stolen the words from the original article. So is this plagiarized? The answer is yes, it is, a resounding yes. So if you handed that in, especially say in university, you could get suspended for a semester, right? They take it really seriously. So that's why it's so important to learn how to put things into our own words. So here you can pause the video. You have an assignment on plagiarism where you can determine, is this plagiarized or not? So go ahead and pause it. And now we're going to talk about summarizing. What does summarizing mean? Well, it gives a shortened version of the original text, and it's in fact much shorter than the original. It does not include your opinion. Here is where some people get themselves in trouble because they really want to say what they think about something. But if you're asked just for a summary, you shouldn't say what you think. So say you had to summarize a list of Donald Trump's tweets, you're not allowed to say, this enrages me. You just have to say the facts of what he said. And again, it must be completely in your own words. So we're going to talk about summarizing fiction, which is stories, versus nonfiction, which are facts, articles, things like that. So we'll start with fiction. So when we're summarizing fiction, we want to get a lot of these key elements. We want to tell the beginning. We want to tell who the characters are. We want to tell the setting, where it happens, the problem. Most stories have a central problem. We want to tell the important events, and of course the ending. And we want to write it in order, from beginning, middle, ending. If you don't plan, sometimes you might forget something and say, oh yeah, and this happened back then, but you don't want to do that. You want it to be all in order. So we're going to start by actually thinking of these categories, and as we read, just like we talked about in the reading strategy section, you can underline the important events. You can underline all of these things as you're reading, and then when you come back to fill out the chart, you'll have everything ready to go. So we're going to use the example of Goldilocks and the Three Bears because I think it's a familiar story to most people. So I'm not going to go through reading every word, but you can see here it's quite long, quite a long story. Here's the end. So when I come to summarize it, as I read through the story, hopefully I was underlining all those sections that I need. The beginning, the characters, the setting. You can even get fancy and use different colored pens if you want to for the different categories. So now before I actually begin the task of writing out the summary, I'm going to plan it. So I'm going to fill out this chart. What happens at the beginning? Goldilocks arrives at the house. Characters: Goldilocks, Mama Bear, Papa Bear, Baby Bear. The setting is the house in the forest, in the kitchen, living room, and bedroom. The problem is that Goldilocks enters without permission, steals, and damages the bear's property. The important events are that Goldilocks arrives, she tastes and eats the porridge, she sits in and breaks the chairs, she lies in and sleeps in the beds. The ending is that the bears come home and scare her away. And again, we're going to remember to write it in order from beginning, middle, and ending. And as we write things in order, we can use some transition words to help the story or the summary flow. So words such as first, next, then, suddenly, subsequently, that's another word for after that, later on, at that moment, whereupon, finally. So you can use these words to transition from sentence to sentence as you write your summary. So here's what I've written for my summary of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. The story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and notice from our grammar a couple weeks ago that the title of the story has capital letters for all the main words, and it's in italics and underlined. The story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, takes place at an isolated house in the forest. As the title would suggest, the characters are Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Baby Bear. In the beginning of the story, the bears are out of the house, and Goldilocks enters their home without permission. Next, she proceeds to take a spoonful from each of their bowls of porridge and eat up Baby Bear's portion. Then she goes into the living room and sits in all of their chairs, breaking Baby Bear's. Lastly, she enters their bedrooms, tests all their beds, and falls asleep in Baby Bear's bed. Not much later, the bears return home to find their porridge gone, their property damaged, and a trespasser asleep in their bed. At the end, Goldilocks wakes up to see 3 growling bears and runs away. All right, and as you can see, I tell where the story happens. I tell the setting by saying it takes place at an isolated house in the forest. I tell who the characters are. You can see that in red. And then I've used my transition words to tell all the events of the story in order. I've used the words in the beginning, next, then, lastly, not much later, and at the end of the story. So that really helps my summary to flow. You can also notice that my summary takes up only 1 slide, whereas the story itself took up about 5. So it's a much shorter version of the original story. So you guys can pause there. And for your assignment for summarizing fiction, you have to read the story Jumanji. And remember our reading strategies. So think about what you know already about Jumanji. You know that you'll have to fill out this chart. So look at the chart. And as you read, be thinking about these categories, underlining them. And then you can, again, fill out the chart and then write your summary. All right. Okay, so on to summarizing nonfiction. So nonfiction are things that are not stories, things that are true, often articles, things like that. So because nonfiction is a different type of writing, we're going to use a different category. We're going to make sure we cover some different content. So we want to say what the topic of the writing is. We want to say who or what it's about. We want to say when or where it happened, the main idea, all the details that support the main idea. Aim for at least 3. And then depending on the type of writing, we'll have it in order. If it's a cause and effect, we'll have the cause first and then the effect. If it's about a problem and a solution, we'll present the problem first and then the solution. If it's comparing and contrasting something, we'll start with the similarities and then tell the differences. If it's telling an event that happened, then we'll tell it in chronological order. We'll tell it in the order that it happened. And again, importantly, we'll have to cite our source. That means tell where we got the information from. So when we're citing our source, when we're telling where the information came from, we can use phrases like this: according to, as reported by, as stated in line with. And then after the paragraph or the sentence, you put your source, the name of where you got the information, and the date it was published in brackets at the end of the paragraph. And sometimes you even put the page number as well. Okay, when we're summarizing nonfiction, here are some of the transition words we can use. When we're adding more facts, we can say, in addition, as well, moreover, furthermore, also. When we're contrasting something, pointing out a difference in something, we can say although, even though, despite, however, nevertheless, on the one hand. If we're telling a cause and effect, something that caused something else to happen, we can say consequently, as a consequence, as a result, therefore, because of this. If we're telling the purpose of something, we can say in order to, in order not to, so as to, or so as not to, with this in mind. When we're summarizing, we can say in conclusion, to sum up, in a nutshell, in brief, or in short. So those are just some helpful words to make your writing flow really nicely and help prime people's brains to process what's coming next. Okay, so here we're going to use that same article about Canada from from the Encyclopedia Britannica that we used earlier, and I'm going to try to summarize it. All right, so we've already read it, so let's see, what's the topic? The topic is Canada. What's it about? Canada. When or where did it happen? Well, it's about now, and where is Canada? The main idea, if we read the whole thing, we think, okay, it's saying that even though Canada has a small population, it is still a great country. Here are 3 details that support that main idea. It has a beautiful landscape, it is welcoming to immigrants and multicultural, and it has lots of natural resources. So those are 3 facts that support my main idea that Canada is a great country. All right, so is this telling a cause and effect, a problem and a solution, compare, contrast, or is it chronological? And I'm going to say it's sort of contrasting. It's saying even though Canada is big and its population is small, it's still a great country. And then I'm going to cite my source, which is the Encyclopedia Britannica 2019. Okay, so here is my summary. Notice again, it's quite a bit shorter than the original. And I'm going to start with this phrase, according to. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Canada is a vast country with a small population. Even so, it is a great country. This is not only due to its spectacular physical landscape and many natural resources, but also because it is such a welcoming country. In fact, it is a model of multiculturalism. It truly is a great country. Okay, so in green, you can see where I've cited my source. I've told where I got this information from. And in red, you can see the transition words I decided to use. Even so, not only due to, but also because, and in fact. So they're a little bit different when you're doing nonfiction versus fiction. All right, so you guys can stop there, and your assignment is to read an article about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And again, look at this list of things you're going to have to fill out before you read it. And as you read, highlight or underline all of those important facts, okay? All right, you can go ahead and try that one. Okay, the next skill we're going to talk about is paraphrasing, and that's similar to summarizing. You put the text into your own words, but the main difference is that it's about the same length as the original, usually just a sentence or 2. So instead of summarizing a whole big story or a whole article, I'm just going to take a couple sentences from that article, maybe an important fact, and I'm going to tell that specific fact in my own words. And again, you have to say where you got that information from. And when it's a specific fact like that, you also want to include the page number. Okay, so here are some examples. So this is something that Nelson Mandela said in 1995. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. So I want to put that in my own words and tell who said it, because I'm not going to pretend that I said it. I know that Nelson Mandela did. So here's my paraphrase. Nelson Mandela, 1995, believes that it doesn't matter if you fall down so long as you get up every time. So I didn't use the exact words and I told who said it. That's a paraphrase. Here's another example. This is from an article by Captain Cousteau, written in 1990 on page 17 of the article. The Antarctic is the vast source of cold on our planet, just as the sun is the source of our heat, and it exerts tremendous control on our climate. So I'm going to try to put that in my own words, and I'm going to start with citing my source. I'm going to say, according to Captain Cousteau in 1990, the Antarctic has a powerful effect on the Earth's climate since it is one of the main origins of the Earth's coolness in the same way that the sun is the origin of our warmth. Okay, here's another example. This is from an article called Bike Helmets, Unused Lifesavers, Consumer Reports, May 1990. One of the more than 1,000 bicycling deaths each year, 3/4 are caused by head injuries. Half of those killed are school-aged children. So I want to put that in my own words. So I'm going to say as reported by, so there I'm citing my source, as reported by Consumer Reports in 1990, 75% of cycling fatalities are due to injuries to the head, and over 50% of those deaths are young children. So I've told where I got the idea, and I put it in my own words. That's a paraphrase. All right, so you can pause here and work on your paraphrasing assignment. And then last of all, we're going to talk about quoting. So giving direct quotations from a text. And doing this, we're going to use the exact words of a text, but you must use the quotation marks and give the reference, tell the author, year, and page number. Otherwise, it's plagiarism. Okay, so again, when we're using quotation marks, we put one at the front, we say the exact words, then we do a comma, and we put one at the end. Okay, that's how we use quotation marks. So, oh, and here's a tricky one. If there's a quotation inside a quotation, you use double quotation marks for the outside of the sandwich and single quotation marks for the inside. In this example, "No," said Judy. So that whole sentence in the blue quotation marks is from a text or story. In the story, Judy's talking, so we use single quotation marks for the words that she said, which were no. Okay, usually when we're quoting from something, when we're writing about a text, we're quoting as evidence. So we're going to say something that we think, and then we're going to use a quotation to show that that's true. So this is some examples from the article you have to read about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So I read that article, and my statement, the fact that I'm telling, is that much of the garbage in the ocean is actually invisible. But I need to provide evidence for that statement. So here's my evidence. Here's two quotations from the text. One is, "Microplastics cannot always be seen by the naked eye." And the second one is that about 70% of marine debris actually sinks to the bottom of the ocean. So both of those show that a lot of the garbage in the ocean is invisible. Some are so small that you can't see them, and the rest of it sinks down. So here I'm going to put those two thoughts together. I'm going to say the purple is my words and the green is the quoted words. Much of the garbage in the ocean is actually invisible. Microplastics, for example, cannot always be seen by the naked eye. And as scientists have recently discovered, about 70% of marine debris actually sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And then in brackets, I write National Geographic 2019, page 2, the author, year, and page number. Here's another example. This one is from the story you read this week, Jumanji. So I'm making this inference. Remember, we talked about inferring. I'm inferring that Judy is bossy. So the story didn't tell me that, but I looked at it and saw some evidence of that. So I'm saying in the story Jumanji, the name of the story is underlined, Judy is the bossier of the children. And here's my evidence. "Put those down and listen," said Judy. "I'm going to read the instructions." So I'm going to put that together in a full sentence. In the story Jumanji, Judy is the bossier of the children. When they first find the game, Peter begins to shake the dice, and Judy admonishes him. "Put those down and listen. I'm going to read the instructions." And again, I told that it was from the story Jumanji, and then I have the page number below. Okay, so you can try your quotation assignment, and then that's it for this week. So congratulations, you guys. This is the last week of your English boot camp, and if you've been doing well in all of your assignments, then you're ready for English 12. Bye-bye.